Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that your body no longer responds the way it used to. Nothing dramatic has happened, no injury, no illness, and yet strength feels harder to summon. Recovery takes longer. Small discomforts linger instead of fading away. This change does not arrive suddenly, but it becomes undeniable after middle age. For most of human history, the body was never expected to last very long. Survival mattered. Endurance did not. Our organs, bones, immune system, and repair mechanisms were shaped to carry us through youth, reproduction, and the narrow window of usefulness to the species. After that point, evolution gradually stopped refining the design. Middle age is not the beginning of decline by accident. It is the age at which the body starts operating without clear evolutionary guidance. Repair becomes less precise. Balance systems lose coordination. Damage that was once temporary begins to accumulate quietly, year after year. This breakdown is not a failure of modern life, nor a sudden malfunction. It is the delayed cost of a biological system built for a much shorter human story. Today, we live far beyond the age our bodies were optimized for, yet the body continues aging as if we do not. If this slow unraveling after middle age is not a mistake, but an expected outcome of how we evolved, then what does that reveal about how long the human body was ever meant to endure? Before middle age, the human body often feels reliable, even predictable. Energy returns after rest. Small injuries fade. Strength appears stable enough that decline seems distant and abstract. This sense of stability is not proof that the body is unchanged. It is the result of biological reserves quietly built during growth and early adulthood. For most of human history, this reserve was rarely questioned because few lives extended far beyond it. The body is not designed to maintain peak performance indefinitely. It is designed to front-load resilience, building excess capacity early so that survival through youth and reproduction is more likely. Before middle age, many systems operate with margins wide enough to hide early inefficiencies. Muscles compensate for minor nerve loss. Bones absorb stress despite subtle mineral changes. The immune system responds effectively even as its precision slowly declines. These adjustments create the illusion that the body is holding steady, when in reality it is already adapting to gradual internal change. This adaptation is not failure. It is a temporary balancing act. As time passes, the reserves that once masked small losses begin to thin. Repair processes still function, but they rely increasingly on compensation rather than renewal. Cells replace damaged components less cleanly. Tissues recover, but not to their previous baseline. The body does not suddenly weaken at middle age. Instead, middle age marks the point at which accumulated adjustments become noticeable. What once happened silently now produces sensation. Fatigue lasts longer. Recovery requires more time. Stability feels less automatic. This shift is not triggered by a single biological switch. It emerges from decades of gradual trade-offs made beneath awareness. Throughout early life, growth and maintenance overlap. Energy supports expansion, repair, and resilience at the same time. Over time, that overlap narrows. Maintenance remains, but growth ends. The same systems that once rebuilt tissue efficiently now focus on preserving structure rather than restoring perfection. Evolution favored this arrangement because it was sufficient. In environments shaped by scarcity, injury, and disease, longevity beyond midlife offered little reproductive advantage. Selection pressure concentrated on early survival, not extended durability. As a result, the body invests heavily in early robustness, then gradually shifts toward conservation. This is why middle age feels like a turning point, even though no single event occurs. The experience reflects a change in visibility, not a change in origin. The processes responsible for later decline begin far earlier, quietly integrated into normal development. What changes at middle age is not the direction of the body, but the margin it has left to conceal its trajectory. The systems that once absorbed stress without complaint now reveal their limits. This revelation often feels personal, even alarming, but it follows a pattern shared across human history. Our ancestors lived within the span where reserves were enough. Modern humans live long enough to sense what happens when those reserves thin. Middle age exposes the truth that stability was never permanent. It was borrowed time, accumulated early, spent slowly, and only noticed once it begins to run low. Understanding this does not remove the experience of change, but it reframes it. The body is not suddenly failing. It is continuing along a path it has followed all along, one that was simply invisible until now. What allows this illusion of stability to persist for so long is not the absence of decline, but the body's ability to redistribute strain. In early adulthood, when one system begins to lose efficiency, another quietly compensates. Muscles recruit additional fibers to maintain strength. The cardiovascular system increases output to offset subtle losses in cellular energy production. Neural pathways reroute signals around minor degradation without conscious awareness. These adjustments are built into human biology because they increase the odds of survival in unpredictable environments. A body that could adapt internally without stopping to repair every imperfection was more likely to endure injury, hunger, and exposure. Over time, however, compensation carries a cost. Each adjustment relies on reserves that are finite. Using one system to support another accelerates wear across multiple layers at once. Before middle age, this cost remains largely hidden because the body still possesses enough excess capacity to absorb it. Performance remains acceptable, even if efficiency is already declining. The person feels functional, capable, and largely unchanged, even as the underlying balance grows more fragile. This fragility is not weakness. It is a consequence of how resilience is structured. Human bodies were shaped to prioritize short-term adaptability over long-term precision. Evolution favored systems that could tolerate noise, error, and imbalance as long as immediate survival was preserved. The trade-off is that errors accumulate rather than resolve completely. Small inefficiencies persist. Minor damage remains partially repaired. These imperfections layer slowly, interacting in ways that are difficult to detect until the system as a whole becomes less flexible. Middle age represents the point where flexibility decreases enough for these layers to become perceptible. The body still functions, but it requires conscious management. Rest must be longer. Movements must be more deliberate. Stress produces lingering effects rather than temporary strain. What feels like sudden change is actually the moment when compensation approaches its limit. The body has not lost its ability to adapt, but it can no longer do so invisibly. Each adjustment now leaves a trace that is felt rather than hidden. This shift explains why middle age often arrives with a sense of surprise. People do not feel as though they have been declining gradually. They feel as though something has changed all at once. In reality, the body has been negotiating decline for decades. The difference is that negotiation has become audible. Signals that were once muted now reach awareness. Fatigue becomes more specific. Discomfort gains persistence. Recovery demands intention. None of these signals indicate malfunction. They indicate transparency. The body is revealing processes that were previously concealed by excess capacity. From an evolutionary perspective, this transparency had little consequence. Few individuals lived long enough for it to matter. Those who did were often beyond the period where physical optimization affected reproductive success. As a result, there was no pressure to extend compensation indefinitely. Instead, the human body evolved to prioritize early life buffering at the expense of late life clarity. Middle age is where this design becomes visible. It is the stage where the cost of adaptation is no longer fully prepaid by youth. The reserves that once softened every imbalance now demand repayment. Understanding this reveals why decline after middle age feels uneven rather than linear. Some systems falter earlier than others. Some days feel unchanged, while others carry unexpected heaviness. This variability is not random. It reflects the uneven depletion of reserves built long ago. The body does not collapse. It renegotiates its limits. Middle age is simply the first time those negotiations are no longer silent. The final element that completes the illusion of stability before middle age is timing. Biological change does not move at a constant pace. Early in life, decline is slow relative to the body's capacity to compensate, so its effects are diluted by abundance. Growth has already ended, but maintenance remains efficient enough to keep systems aligned. What changes as middle age approaches is not simply the amount of wear, but the synchronization of multiple limits arriving at once. Reserves that were built during development were never infinite. and they were never replenished at the same rate they were spent. Over decades, small withdrawals accumulate quietly. When several systems approach their thresholds together, the experience of change becomes concentrated. This creates the impression that the body has crossed an invisible line. In reality, no single boundary exists. The sensation of crossing is produced by overlapping constraints finally becoming noticeable at the same time. Muscle strength, joint resilience, metabolic flexibility, and immune responsiveness each decline along their own timelines. Early on, these timelines rarely intersect in a way that affects daily life. Later, their convergence reshapes how the body feels as a whole. This convergence is why middle age often feels like a shift in identity rather than a simple physical adjustment. The body does not merely perform tasks differently, it requires different strategies to achieve the same outcomes. Movements that once relied on automatic coordination now demand awareness. Recovery that once occurred overnight extends across days. Stress that once dissipated leaves residue. These experiences are not signs of sudden deterioration. They are the moment when the body's internal pacing becomes visible. Evolution did not design the human body to communicate gradual decline early, because early communication offered little advantage. Pain, fatigue, and limitation are costly signals. They divert attention and energy. In early life, suppressing such signals supported survival and reproduction. Only when suppression becomes unsustainable do these signals emerge. Middle age is when suppression reaches its practical limit. The body begins to speak more honestly about its condition, not because it has worsened abruptly, but because it can no longer afford silence. This honesty is often misinterpreted as failure. Many people respond by searching for a cause, a trigger, or a mistake. Yet the cause is temporal rather than accidental. Time itself is the organizing force behind this transition. The body's design assumes a shorter horizon than modern life provides. When life extends beyond that horizon, the underlying structure is exposed. This exposure can feel unsettling, but it is also informative. It reveals that the stability of youth was conditional, not permanent. It depended on stored capacity, not on ongoing renewal. Once that distinction becomes clear, the experience of middle age can be reframed. The body is not breaking unexpectedly. It is revealing the terms under which it has always operated. Decline does not begin here. Awareness does. This awareness changes how the body must be inhabited. Effort becomes something to manage rather than ignore. Limits become features to navigate rather than obstacles to overcome. This shift marks the true end of the illusion that the body is self-sustaining. What replaces that illusion is not collapse, but negotiation. The body continues, but with fewer buffers and clearer signals. Middle age is where the conversation between time and biology becomes audible. The body has been answering time's demands since birth. Only now does the answer reach consciousness. To understand why the human body begins to break down after middle age, it is necessary to look beyond medicine and into the logic of evolution itself. Natural selection does not aim for longevity in the way modern humans imagine it. It does not design bodies to remain strong, balanced, and resilient for as long as possible. Instead, it favors traits that increase the likelihood of survival and reproduction within a specific window of time. For humans, that window was historically narrow. Most individuals lived in environments marked by scarcity, danger, infection, and injury. Reaching adulthood and producing offspring was already a significant achievement. Living far beyond that point was uncommon and carried little influence on evolutionary outcomes. As a result, the forces shaping the human body were concentrated early, not spread evenly across the lifespan. This creates what can be understood as a quiet cutoff point, not a sharp boundary but a gradual fading of evolutionary attention. During childhood and early adulthood, the body is under strong selective pressure to function efficiently. Growth is rapid, repair systems are precise, redundancy is built into vital processes to protect against failure. After reproduction becomes likely, that pressure weakens. Traits that benefit long-term maintenance without contributing to reproductive success are not strongly favored. They are not selected against either. They are simply left unrefined. This absence of refinement is crucial. It means that the body continues to function, but without the same level of optimization. Over time, small inefficiencies remain uncorrected. Repair mechanisms persist, but they are not upgraded for extended use. The body is not abandoned by evolution. It is left with a design that was sufficient for a shorter life. Middle age is where this sufficiency becomes visible. The systems responsible for stability were never meant to operate flawlessly for many decades beyond their primary role. They were meant to last long enough. When life extends further, the underlying assumptions of that design are exposed. This is why decline after middle age does not resemble an engineered failure. There is no single weak point. Instead, there is a general loss of refinement across multiple systems. Bones lose density slowly. Muscles lose efficiency. The immune system becomes less discriminating. Hormonal signals drift rather than collapse. Each change reflects a lack of ongoing evolutionary pressure rather than damage caused by modern living. In this sense, middle age represents a biological afterlife. The body is still alive, active, and responsive, but it is operating beyond the phase for which it was most carefully shaped. This does not mean that aging is programmed to cause suffering. It means that there was no strong evolutionary incentive to prevent it. Natural selection works by removing traits that reduce early survival and reproduction. It does not actively preserve traits that only matter late in life. As long as a body performs adequately during its critical years, what happens afterward has little effect on evolutionary success. This perspective reframes the experience of decline. The body is not breaking because something has gone wrong. It is changing because the forces that once kept everything tightly regulated have loosened their grip. Maintenance continues, but without the precision that characterized earlier life. Variation increases. Stability becomes less predictable. These outcomes are not errors. They are the natural result of a system designed under different expectations. For most of human history, reaching middle age itself was an achievement. The fact that modern humans routinely live far beyond it is a recent development. Our bodies carry the imprint of an earlier world, one where longevity was uncertain and durability beyond midlife was unnecessary. Middle age marks the point where that imprint begins to show. It is where the absence of evolutionary fine-tuning becomes tangible. The body continues to function, but it does so without the same guidance that shaped its early years. Understanding this does not make aging disappear, but it removes the mystery. The breakdown after middle age is not a punishment or a malfunction. It is the echo of a design optimized for a life that was once much shorter. This gradual fading of evolutionary pressure after early adulthood creates an important consequence that is often misunderstood. Aging is not driven by a single internal program pushing the body toward collapse. It emerges from what evolution did not need to solve. When natural selection weakens, biological systems are allowed to drift. Small imperfections are tolerated. Minor inefficiencies persist. Over long periods of time, this tolerance becomes visible as decline. The body continues to operate using mechanisms that were never refined for extended use. Cells still divide, proteins are still produced, damage is still repaired, but the standards for precision quietly loosen. Early in life, repair must be accurate because errors threaten survival and reproduction. Later, accuracy matters less to evolutionary outcomes, so there is no pressure to maintain it at the same level. This difference explains why aging feels uneven rather than orderly. Some systems deteriorate earlier than others, not because they are weaker, but because their maintenance was never optimized for longevity. DNA repair, for example, remains effective enough to prevent catastrophic failure, but it becomes less exact. Small mutations accumulate without immediate consequence. Protein recycling systems still clear damaged components, but not completely. Over time, partially functional molecules remain in circulation. Tissues adapt to these changes by adjusting function rather than restoring original condition. This adaptation keeps the organism alive, but it alters performance. The body becomes more tolerant of imperfection, and that tolerance shapes the experience of aging. Importantly, this process does not require damage from modern lifestyles to begin. It is built into the structure of biological maintenance itself. Even in environments free from pollution, excess calories, or chronic stress, aging would still unfold. Modern conditions may influence its speed or expression, but they do not create the underlying pattern. The pattern exists because evolution favored adequacy over durability. A system that functions well enough early and reasonably later is more efficient than one engineered for perfection across an entire lifespan. From an evolutionary standpoint, investing energy into long-term refinement offers diminishing returns. Energy spent on maintaining flawless function at 60 provides little benefit if few individuals reach that age. As a result, biological systems evolve to prioritize efficiency, not permanence. Middle age is where this efficiency reveals its limits. The body has not lost its ability to sustain life, but it has lost the evolutionary incentive to remain finely tuned. This loss of incentive manifests as variability. Responses become less consistent. Recovery becomes less predictable. The same effort produces different results on different days. These fluctuations are not signs of malfunction, they are signs of reduced regulation. Early in life, tight regulation keeps outcomes uniform. Later, loosened regulation allows wider variation. The body becomes more individual, less standardized. This individuality is often interpreted as decline, but it is also a form of freedom from rigid control. However, that freedom comes with cost. Without strict regulation, errors accumulate. Without continuous refinement, systems rely on workarounds. Over time, these workarounds interact, producing the complex experience of aging rather than a single clear cause. Understanding this helps explain why there is no universal moment when aging begins. It does not start at a birthday or a measurable threshold. It becomes noticeable when accumulated drift crosses the boundary of perception. Middle age is where that boundary is commonly crossed because it is where evolutionary optimization has long since ended, and the consequences of drift have had time to compound. The body has been aging since early adulthood, but it has been aging quietly. After middle age, aging becomes audible. Signals that were once suppressed emerge as sensations. Stiffness, fatigue, slower adaptation, and lingering discomfort are not new processes. They are older processes finally exceeding the margin of invisibility. This perspective removes the expectation that aging should be preventable through correction alone. Because aging is rooted in the absence of evolutionary refinement, it cannot be fully reversed without altering the fundamental logic of biology. The body is not breaking because it is failing to keep up. It is breaking because it was never shaped to last indefinitely. Middle age is the point where this truth becomes unavoidable. The body continues forward, not as a machine losing parts, but as a living system operating beyond the conditions for which it was most carefully designed. The idea of a quiet evolutionary cutoff helps explain not only why the body changes after middle age, but also why those changes often feel strangely impersonal. Many people search for meaning in decline, assuming it reflects poor choices, missed opportunities, or individual failure. Yet from an evolutionary perspective, the body's trajectory after middle age is largely indifferent to personal history. Natural selection shaped a general framework, not a personalized outcome. Once that framework has served its purpose, variation is allowed to increase. Bodies age differently, not because they are judged differently by evolution, but because evolution no longer exerts tight control. This lack of control allows randomness to play a larger role. Minor differences in genetics, early development, and life exposure begin to matter more. Systems that were once synchronized drift out of alignment at different speeds. Some individuals notice musculoskeletal changes first. Others experience metabolic shifts or altered immune responses. None of these paths are planned. They are permitted. This permission is a defining feature of aging after middle age. The body is no longer guided toward a single optimal state. 2. It explores a wider range of functional outcomes, all of which remain compatible with survival, but not with uniform performance. In earlier life, deviation from the optimal state carried consequences. Poor growth, weak immunity, or reduced stamina threatened survival and reproduction. Those deviations were corrected or eliminated through selection. Later in life, deviation carries less consequence, so correction becomes optional rather than mandatory. This shift does not imply neglect, it implies neutrality. Evolution does not act against aging because aging does not strongly affect reproductive success. As a result, there is no built-in safeguard to preserve consistency across decades. The body continues, but without a blueprint for how it should feel or function beyond a certain age. This absence of a blueprint explains why advice about aging often feels contradictory. Different bodies respond differently because they are no longer being pulled toward the same target. What works for one person may have little effect on another. From an evolutionary standpoint, this variability is expected. It is the natural outcome of a system released from strict optimization. Middle age is the stage where this release becomes apparent. The body no longer corrects every imbalance. It tolerates a broader range of internal states. Some of these states are comfortable, others are not. All are biologically acceptable. This acceptance is unsettling to modern minds, accustomed to control and predictability. We expect the body to follow rules, schedules, and averages. Evolution does not operate on such expectations. It operates on sufficiency. As long as the organism remains viable, variation is allowed. The experience of aging reflects this allowance. It is why decline does not progress smoothly or uniformly. It advances in fits, pauses, and asymmetries. This pattern is not chaotic. It is underregulated. Recognizing this helps dissolve the idea that the body is breaking because it is malfunctioning. Instead, it is changing because regulation has loosened. The tight orchestration of early life gives way to a more permissive state. In this state, the body continues to function, but it does so with less oversight. Middle age is not the moment evolution turns against the body. It is the moment evolution steps back. The body is left to manage itself with the tools it already has. Some tools perform well for longer than others, some wear down sooner, none are replaced. This perspective reframes the sense of loss often associated with aging. What feels like abandonment is actually absence of intervention. The body is not being pushed toward decline, it is no longer being pulled toward precision. The difference matters. It explains why decline after middle age feels gradual, uneven, and deeply individual. It also explains why no single solution can restore youth. Youth was not maintained by effort alone. It was enforced by evolutionary pressure that no longer applies. Middle age reveals what happens when that pressure fades. The body continues its work, guided by habit rather than instruction, adapting where it can, tolerating what it must, and slowly expressing the full range of variation that was once suppressed. This is not the failure of design. It is the unveiling of how the design was always meant to operate once its primary task was complete. After middle age, the body does not stop repairing itself. What changes is how accurately that repair is carried out. In early life, biological repair systems operate with high precision. Damaged cells are replaced cleanly. Proteins are folded correctly. DNA errors are corrected before they propagate. This level of precision is essential when growth, reproduction, and survival depend on reliable performance. Errors at this stage carry immediate consequences. As a result, repair systems are tightly regulated and energetically supported. Over time, however, this precision becomes costly to maintain. Perfect repair requires constant energy investment, molecular surveillance, and redundancy. Evolution favored this investment early, when it mattered most. After that critical period, the cost-benefit balance shifts. Repair continues, but it does so under looser constraints. Accuracy gives way to adequacy. The body prioritizes keeping systems functional rather than restoring them to original condition. This shift is subtle and gradual, but it has profound consequences. Small errors that would once have been corrected now persist. Minor damage is patched rather than rebuilt. These compromises are efficient in the short term, but they accumulate over decades. Middle age is when their cumulative effect begins to surface. The decline is not caused by the absence of repair, but by the reduced fidelity of repair. Cells still divide, but they do so with slightly more error. Tissues still regenerate, but their structure becomes less uniform. The immune system still removes damaged components, but its discrimination becomes less sharp. Each system remains operational, yet none perform with the same exactness they once did. This loss of precision explains why aging rarely appears as sudden failure. Instead, it emerges as a slow erosion of reliability. The body works, but it works unevenly. Some repairs succeed fully, others fall just short. Over time, these near misses accumulate into noticeable decline. Importantly, this process is not random chaos. It follows a logic shaped by energy allocation and evolutionary sufficiency. Maintaining perfect accuracy indefinitely would require more energy than the body can sustain over a long lifespan. Evolution resolved this constraint by allowing precision to taper once its returns diminished. Middle age is where that taper becomes perceptible. The body is no longer maintaining itself to a youthful standard. It is maintaining itself to a survivable one. This distinction is critical. The body is not failing to repair itself, it is repairing itself differently. Understanding this helps explain why many age-related changes feel frustrating rather than catastrophic. Strength returns, but more slowly. Wounds heal, but leave lingering stiffness. Illness resolves, but drains more energy. These experiences reflect repair systems that are still active, but no longer optimized for speed or perfection. They also explain why decline feels uneven across different tissues. Systems that rely heavily on precise molecular organization, such as muscles and connective tissue, show changes earlier than those built for redundancy. The body's design reveals its priorities through what it preserves longest. Middle age marks the stage where preservation outweighs restoration. The goal shifts from rebuilding what was lost to preventing complete failure. This strategy is effective in extending life, but it changes how the body feels from within. Movements become more deliberate. Recovery becomes more noticeable. The body demands attention rather than offering effortless function. These demands are not signs of breakdown alone. They are signals of a system operating under a different standard of repair. Middle age is where that standard quietly changes. The body continues its work, but with fewer corrections, more tolerance for error, and a growing reliance on compensation. What emerges is not collapse, but gradual imperfection. This imperfection is the foundation upon which later decline is built. As repair becomes less precise after middle age, the body increasingly relies on replacement rather than renewal. In early life, damaged components are often restored to near original condition. Cells divide cleanly, tissues reorganize accurately, and structural integrity is preserved with minimal compromise. Later, the balance shifts. Instead of perfect restoration, the body favors faster, less exact solutions that maintain function without recreating original form. This shift reflects a deeper change in biological priorities. Renewal is expensive. It demands time, energy, and coordination across multiple systems. Replacement, by contrast, is efficient. It keeps the organism moving forward even if quality gradually declines. Over decades, this strategy reshapes the body from the inside out. Tissues become less uniform. Cellular populations grow more varied. Structures that were once tightly organized develop subtle irregularities. None of these changes are catastrophic on their own. Together, they alter how the body responds to stress. Movements that once flowed smoothly now require more effort, because coordination relies on parts that are no longer identical to what they replaced. Repair no longer returns the body to a known baseline. It creates a new baseline each time. This is why recovery after middle age often feels incomplete. The body heals, but it does not revert. Each repair leaves a small imprint that slightly changes future performance. Over time, these imprints accumulate. Muscles regain strength, but not in the same pattern. Connective tissue restores continuity, but with reduced elasticity. The immune system resolves threats, but with a broader margin of error. These outcomes are not mistakes. They are the result of a system choosing continuity over fidelity. From an evolutionary perspective, this choice makes sense. Survival depends on maintaining basic function, not on preserving exact form. Once reproductive success is secured, there is little advantage in investing resources into restoring youthful precision. What matters is that the organism remains capable of meeting essential demands. Middle age is when this trade-off becomes visible. The body continues to repair itself, but it does so in ways that prioritize speed and sufficiency. This explains why aging feels cumulative rather than episodic. There is rarely a single moment of loss. Instead, there is a series of small adjustments that subtly alter capacity. Each adjustment seems manageable. Together, they reshape experience. Tasks that once felt effortless now carry weight. Endurance fluctuates. Stability feels conditional rather than assumed. These sensations reflect a repair system that has shifted its standard. The body is no longer trying to return to what it was. It is trying to remain workable. This shift also explains why aging is uneven across individuals. The rate at which replacement overtakes renewal varies based on early development, genetic factors, and accumulated exposure. Some bodies maintain higher precision longer. Others adopt replacement strategies earlier. Neither path is abnormal. Both reflect the same underlying logic. Middle age reveals this logic by making it perceptible. The body becomes less concerned with symmetry and more concerned with continuity. Imperfection is tolerated as long as it does not threaten survival. This tolerance allows life to extend, but it changes how the body feels from moment to moment. Movements may succeed without feeling smooth. Strength may return without feeling stable. Health may persist without feeling robust. These experiences are not signs that repair has failed. They are signs that repair has adapted to different priorities. Understanding this reframes the frustration many people feel when their bodies no longer bounce back the way they once did. The body is not forgetting how to heal. It is choosing a different form of healing. Middle age marks the stage where replacement becomes the dominant strategy. Renewal fades, not because it is impossible, but because it is no longer favored. The body continues its quiet work, maintaining continuity at the expense of exactness. Over time, this balance defines the lived experience of aging. As replacement gradually overtakes renewal, another quiet shift occurs within the body. Tolerance for imperfection becomes embedded into normal function. In early life, deviation from optimal structure is treated as a problem to be corrected. After middle age, deviation becomes part of the operating environment. Systems no longer aim to eliminate irregularities. They adapt around them. This adaptation allows life to continue, but it alters the internal landscape in subtle ways. Signals become noisier. Feedback loops lose sharpness. The body responds to stress, but responses vary depending on accumulated wear rather than immediate demand. This is why effort feels less predictable after middle age. The same activity can produce different sensations on different days, even without obvious cause. The body is navigating a terrain shaped by layers of past repairs, each slightly different from what came before. These layers interact. A joint repaired with reduced elasticity alters movement patterns. Altered movement increases strain elsewhere. That strain triggers further repair, again with compromise. Over time, the body becomes a record of its own adaptations. Function persists, but it is supported by a growing network of adjustments rather than by original design. This network is resilient in its own way. It allows survival under changing conditions, yet it also amplifies variability. Stability becomes something that must be managed rather than assumed. The body still knows how to function, but it requires cooperation from awareness. Movements must be paced. Rest must be intentional. Recovery must be respected. These demands are not imposed suddenly. They emerge gradually as the tolerance for imperfection expands. From an evolutionary perspective, this tolerance was acceptable because it rarely reached its limits within a typical lifespan. For most of human history, individuals did not accumulate enough layers of adaptation for variability to dominate experience. Modern longevity changes that equation. People now live long enough for accumulated compromise to shape daily sensation. Middle age is where this accumulation first becomes noticeable. It is the stage where the body's history begins to weigh on its present. This weight does not imply failure. It reflects continuity. The body carries forward everything it has adapted to, including the costs of those adaptations. Repair no longer resets the system. It adds another layer. Each layer is functional, but none are neutral. Together, they define the lived experience of aging. Understanding this clarifies why aging feels different from injury or illness. Injury disrupts function temporarily. Illness alters function acutely. Aging reshapes function slowly by integrating imperfection into normal operation. The body becomes less symmetrical, less uniform, and less predictable, yet still capable. This capability is often underestimated because it does not resemble youthful strength. It is quieter, more conditional, and more dependent on balance. Middle age is when this new mode of function begins to assert itself. The body is not simply wearing out, it is transforming into a system that survives by adaptation rather than by precision. This transformation explains why attempts to restore youthful performance often feel limited. The body is no longer organized around that goal. It is organized around continuity. Repair serves survival, not optimization. Renewal fades, replacement dominates, and tolerance for imperfection becomes the foundation of continued life. Middle age marks the point where this foundation becomes visible. The body reveals that it has been changing all along, not toward failure, but toward a different form of persistence, one that trades exactness for endurance and predictability for resilience. After middle age, the body's challenges are rarely caused by a single major failure. Instead, they emerge from the slow accumulation of countless small changes. Each change on its own appears insignificant: a slightly less efficient repair, a marginal loss of elasticity, a minor imbalance in signaling. None of these threaten survival when they occur. The body absorbs them, adapts, and moves on. Over time, however, these small changes interact. Their effects compound. What was once easily compensated becomes harder to offset. This accumulation is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with a clear beginning. It unfolds quietly, shaped by time rather than events. In early life, the body possesses enough redundancy to isolate small problems. One system can absorb stress without affecting others. As reserves thin, that isolation weakens. Strain spreads more easily across systems. A change in posture affects joints. Joint strain alters movement. Altered movement increases energy cost. Increased energy cost accelerates fatigue. Each link is modest, but together they reshape experience. Middle age is when these links begin to connect in noticeable ways. The body still functions, but it no longer does so in separate compartments. Systems become interdependent. A disturbance in one area echoes elsewhere. This interconnectedness magnifies the impact of small changes. What would once have been dismissed now leaves a trace. Fatigue lasts longer, stiffness spreads, recovery becomes uneven. These sensations are not evidence of sudden decline. They are the result of accumulated adjustments finally interacting. Evolution did not prevent this accumulation because it rarely mattered within a shorter lifespan. Small inefficiencies could exist without consequence as long as they did not converge. Modern longevity allows them to converge. The body carries forward every compromise it has made. Over decades, the number of compromises grows. Middle age is where their combined weight begins to influence daily life. This weight is often misunderstood as weakness. In reality, it reflects persistence. The body has survived by adapting repeatedly rather than by remaining unchanged. Each adaptation solved an immediate problem. None were designed to consider their long-term interaction. The body is not built to forecast decades ahead. It responds to present demands. Over time, this reactive strategy creates complexity. The body becomes layered with solutions, each addressing a moment in the past. When enough layers accumulate, the system grows harder to manage. Balance requires more effort. Stability requires attention. The ease of youth fades not because strength disappears, but because coordination becomes more demanding. This explains why middle age often feels heavier rather than weaker. The body is carrying its history forward. Every past repair, compensation, and adjustment remains embedded. The cost of that history is cumulative. Understanding this helps reframe the idea of breakdown. The body is not collapsing under sudden damage. It is responding to the combined effect of many small, survivable changes that have slowly aligned. Middle age is where alignment replaces isolation. The body's systems begin to feel their shared limits. What emerges is not a single point of failure, but a gradual shift in how effort is distributed. Tasks require more energy, because energy must be shared across systems that are no longer independently robust. This redistribution marks the beginning of a new phase. The body still endures, but it does so with greater awareness of its own complexity. Small changes are no longer silent, that speak through sensation. Middle age is when the accumulation becomes audible. As small changes accumulate, Another shift becomes apparent after middle age. The body loses its ability to fully separate cause and effect. In youth, a strain has a clear source and a clear resolution. Effort leads to fatigue, rest restores balance, and the system resets. Later in life, this clarity fades. The body carries multiple unfinished adjustments at the same time. Fatigue may reflect not just recent effort, but the interaction of posture, sleep quality, immune activity, and lingering tissue repair. Discomfort may not trace back to a single movement or moment, but to the way several systems are sharing stress unevenly. This complexity makes the body feel less predictable. The same routine can produce different outcomes because the starting conditions are never identical. Each day begins with a slightly different internal state, shaped by what has not yet resolved. These unresolved elements are not failures. They are the natural result of a body that prioritizes continuity over completion. In early life, most adjustments are temporary. The body resolves them fully and returns to baseline. After middle age, baseline itself becomes fluid. The body no longer insists on returning to a single reference point. It moves forward carrying partial resolutions. This forward movement allows life to continue without interruption, but it blurs the line between recovery and decline. Recovery still occurs, but it rarely restores the exact conditions that existed before. Instead, it establishes a new balance that includes the residue of previous strain. Over time, this residue accumulates into a background state that shapes sensation. Energy feels less abundant not because it is absent, but because it is already allocated. The body is constantly distributing resources across multiple demands, some of which never fully conclude. This constant allocation reduces flexibility. When a new demand appears, there is less margin to absorb it cleanly. The result is a sense of heaviness rather than exhaustion, persistence rather than pain. These sensations are subtle, but they are consistent. They reflect a body operating with fewer unused reserves. Evolution did not optimize for reserve preservation across long lifespans. It optimized for responsiveness in the present. As long as immediate demands were met, unresolved background strain posed little risk. Over decades, however, unresolved strain becomes the dominant feature of experience. Middle age is where this dominance begins to surface. The body feels busy even at rest, not because it is failing, but because it is managing more simultaneously. This management is invisible but energetically costly. Systems that once operated independently now share load. When one system is strained, others adjust to compensate. This mutual compensation increases efficiency in the short term but accelerates accumulation in the long term. The body remains capable, but it becomes less forgiving. Mistakes linger longer. Recovery requires intention. The ease of youth gives way to negotiation. This negotiation does not signal collapse. It signals maturity of a system that has adapted repeatedly without being reset. Middle age is when the body reveals that it has memory. It remembers every compromise, every adjustment, every unfinished repair. That memory shapes how it responds now. Understanding this helps explain why decline feels gradual yet persistent. It is not driven by one cause that can be removed. It is sustained by a network of interactions that have grown denser over time. The body is not breaking down in isolation. It is carrying forward everything it has survived. The cost of survival is accumulation. Middle age is when that cost becomes felt. As accumulation deepens, the body begins to express its limits not through sharp signals, but through sustained background sensations. Pain is no longer always acute. Fatigue is no longer always tied to effort. Instead, the body communicates through persistence. Sensations linger. Discomfort settles into routine. What once felt temporary becomes familiar. This shift is often unsettling because it lacks a clear cause. There is no single injury to heal, no moment to point to. The body simply feels heavier, slower to respond, more resistant to reset. This persistence is the hallmark of accumulated change. Each small compromise contributes to a state that is stable enough to maintain life, but no longer light enough to feel effortless. The body adapts to this state by recalibrating expectations. Movements are adjusted to avoid strain. Energy is paced rather than spent freely. Rest becomes an active process rather than a passive one. These adaptations are not signs of giving up. They are strategies for continuity. The body learns to live within its accumulated structure. Evolution did not provide a mechanism to erase this structure, because erasure was rarely necessary. Most lives ended before accumulation dominated experience. Modern longevity exposes what happens when accumulation becomes the primary condition. Middle age is where this exposure begins. The body transitions from a system that recovers fully to one that manages continuously. Management replaces restoration as the dominant mode. This change explains why advice centered on fixing often feels inadequate. There is no single fix for accumulation. It is distributed across systems, embedded in tissue, signaling, and behavior. The body is not broken in one place. It is shaped everywhere. This shaping does not eliminate capability. It changes how capability is accessed. Strength is still present, but it must be summoned carefully. Endurance remains, but it fluctuates. Stability exists, but it depends on balance rather than force. Middle age marks the point where the body's history becomes inseparable from its present. Every action draws upon a system already engaged in ongoing management. This engagement consumes attention and energy, even when nothing appears to be wrong. The sensation of decline often arises from this constant engagement rather than from loss alone. The body feels busy because it is busy. It is coordinating around accumulated constraints. Understanding this reframes the idea of breakdown. The body is not failing piece by piece. It is adapting to a load that has grown gradually beyond the simplicity of youth. Accumulation transforms the body into a more complex system, one that requires cooperation between awareness and physiology. Middle age is when that cooperation becomes necessary. The body no longer carries itself effortlessly. It invites participation. Listening becomes important. Ignoring signals becomes costly. These shifts do not signal the end of function. They signal a change in how function is sustained. The body continues, not by returning to what it was, but by integrating everything it has become. Accumulation is not an enemy. It is the record of survival. Middle age is when that record begins to speak clearly. After middle age, one of the most important shifts inside the body is not structural, but energetic. The body begins to redistribute how it uses energy. In early life, energy is abundant relative to demand. Growth has ended, but maintenance, repair, movement, and adaptation can all be supported at once. The body operates with surplus. Tasks overlap without conflict. Physical effort, immune response, and recovery coexist without obvious trade-offs. Over time, this surplus narrows. Energy production remains sufficient for survival, but no longer enough to support every process at full capacity simultaneously. Middle age marks the stage where energy must be allocated rather than assumed. The body begins to choose quietly where energy goes and where it is conserved. These choices are not conscious, but they shape experience. When energy is directed toward basic maintenance, less remains for rapid repair. When immune activity increases, physical stamina declines. When recovery is prioritized, alertness may fade. None of these shifts indicate disease. They reflect a system operating closer to its energetic limits. Evolution shaped the body to function efficiently under scarcity. Energy was meant to be spent where it mattered most for immediate survival. As long as basic needs were met, extended performance was unnecessary. Modern longevity places the body in a prolonged state where survival is stable, but energetic margins are thin. The body adapts by tightening control. Movements become economical. Effort is rationed. Recovery is scheduled rather than automatic. This rationing explains why middle age often feels like a loss of vitality, even when health appears intact. Vitality is not gone. It is being distributed carefully. The body no longer invests energy freely into all systems. It prioritizes continuity over intensity. This prioritization affects how the body responds to stress. Challenges that once felt stimulating now feel draining, not because the body is weaker, but because it cannot afford to spend energy without consequence. Energy spent in one area must be borrowed from another. The result is delayed fatigue rather than immediate exhaustion. The body completes tasks, but the cost appears later. This delayed cost is a hallmark of aging energy dynamics. Early in life, energy expenditure and recovery are closely linked. After middle age, they become decoupled. Effort is repaid slowly. The body remains capable, but it demands pacing. Evolution did not design a system to sustain high output indefinitely. It designed a system to survive fluctuating demands. Once life extends beyond those fluctuations into long-term stability, the body reveals its limits. Energy becomes a resource to manage rather than a background condition. This management is not a failure. It is an adaptation to a longer lifespan than originally anticipated. Middle age is where this adaptation becomes noticeable. The body continues to function, but it does so with an awareness of cost. Every action leaves a trace. Rest becomes purposeful. Activity becomes strategic. The experience of aging begins to feel less like loss and more like negotiation. Energy is still present, but it is no longer free. The body teaches restraint not as limitation, but as survival strategy. Understanding this reframes the sensation of slowing down. It is not the disappearance of capacity, it is the emergence of prioritization. The body is choosing how to endure. As energy becomes a limited resource after middle age, the body begins to reveal a pattern that is often misunderstood as weakness: delayed recovery. In early life, recovery is rapid because energy can be redirected easily. After exertion, the body quickly restores balance, replenishes reserves, and clears byproducts of stress. This efficiency depends on surplus. When surplus fades, recovery does not stop, but it slows. The body must now rebuild while continuing to meet ongoing demands. Energy used for repair competes with energy needed for movement, immune defense, and basic regulation. This competition changes how recovery feels. Rest no longer produces immediate renewal. It produces gradual stabilization. The body settles rather than rebounds. This shift explains why fatigue after middle age often feels deeper and more persistent. It is not caused by a lack of effort to recover, but by the need to recover while still operating near baseline demand. The body cannot afford to shut down systems entirely for repair. It must maintain function while healing. As a result, recovery unfolds in layers. Some systems recover quickly, others lag behind. The person feels better, but not fully restored. This partial restoration becomes the new normal. Evolution favored this approach because it preserved survival under continuous pressure. In ancestral environments, prolonged inactivity increased risk. A body that could remain functional while repairing itself had an advantage. The cost of this strategy is efficiency. Healing becomes slower, less complete, and more energetically expensive over time. Middle age is where this cost becomes noticeable. Activities that once felt invigorating now require planning because their recovery cost is higher. The body must decide how much energy it can afford to spend before consequences appear. This decision-making is automatic, but it shapes behavior. People become more selective about effort. They pace themselves not out of fear, but out of necessity. The body teaches conservation through sensation. Discomfort appears sooner. Fatigue lingers longer. These signals guide energy use in a system that can no longer afford waste. Importantly, this is not a sign that the body is failing to adapt. It is a sign that adaptation has become more refined. The body is learning to survive longer with fewer reserves. Delayed recovery reflects a system that has adjusted its expectations. Instead of restoring peak condition, it aims to restore functionality. Once function is sufficient, repair slows or pauses to conserve energy for other needs. This explains why recovery feels inconsistent. Some days offer more relief than others depending on what demands are present. Sleep quality, immune activity, and stress all draw from the same pool. When one demand increases, recovery elsewhere diminishes. The body remains balanced, but that balance is dynamic rather than stable. Middle age is when this dynamic balance replaces the predictable cycles of youth. Understanding this helps reframe frustration around slowing recovery. The body is not refusing to heal. It is allocating limited energy across competing priorities. Healing still occurs, but it no longer dominates the schedule. It shares time with survival. This sharing extends life, but it changes how life feels. Effort carries memory. Fatigue carries history. Recovery becomes a process rather than an event. Middle age marks the stage where energy management becomes central to experience. The body does not collapse under this demand. It adapts by becoming more deliberate. What feels like loss is often the body teaching restraint. Energy is still present, but it must be used with care. As energy allocation becomes more constrained after middle age, the body begins to change how it signals need. In youth, hunger, fatigue, and pain function as clear prompts followed by clear resolution. Eat, rest, recover. After middle age, these signals become less direct. The body no longer asks for simple replenishment, it asks for regulation. Fatigue does not always mean sleep is needed. Hunger does not always indicate caloric deficit. Discomfort does not always point to injury. These signals reflect energy imbalance rather than immediate shortage. The body is communicating that resources are being stretched across multiple systems at once. This complexity can feel confusing. People often respond by increasing effort, pushing harder, or expecting familiar solutions to work. When they do not, frustration grows, yet the body is not miscommunicating. It is speaking a more nuanced language shaped by constraint. Energy is no longer abundant enough to support sharp signals with fast resolution. Instead, signals blur together. Fatigue overlaps with mental strain. Physical discomfort merges with reduced resilience. The body expresses its limits through combinations rather than isolated alerts. Middle age is where this blended signaling becomes common. The body must coordinate competing needs continuously, and its signals reflect that coordination rather than single deficits. This change also alters motivation. In early life, energy surplus supports spontaneity. Effort feels rewarding because recovery is assured. After middle age, effort requires calculation because recovery is conditional. The body becomes more cautious not because it fears damage, but because it recognizes cost. This recognition emerges as reduced drive rather than reduced ability. Desire to act softens before capacity disappears. This often leads to the belief that motivation has declined due to age. In reality, motivation is being shaped by energy economics. The body is discouraging unnecessary expenditure. Evolution favored this restraint because it conserved energy under prolonged scarcity. In a longer lifespan, this restraint extends across decades. Middle age is when it becomes conscious. Activities that once felt automatic now require justification. The body asks whether the cost is worth it. This question is not asked verbally. It is asked through sensation. Effort feels heavier. Recovery feels uncertain. These feelings guide behavior without requiring conscious calculation. They are adaptive responses to limited energetic margin. Understanding this helps explain why rest alone does not always restore vitality. Rest addresses immediate fatigue, but it does not expand energy capacity. The body's signaling is not asking for rest alone. It is asking for balance across time. Overexertion followed by rest becomes less effective than moderated effort sustained consistently. The body prefers stability to oscillation. This preference emerges naturally as energy becomes scarce. Middle age is where the body begins to favor patterns over bursts. This shift does not eliminate joy or engagement. It changes their rhythm. Engagement becomes selective. Joy becomes quieter. Satisfaction arises from continuity rather than intensity. These changes are often mistaken for decline. They are adaptations to endurance. The body is recalibrating how life is lived under new constraints. Energy is no longer a background condition. It is a governing factor. Signals reflect that governance. Listening to them becomes more important than overriding them. Middle age teaches this lesson gradually, through subtle feedback rather than sharp warnings. The body continues to function, but it insists on cooperation. Energy must be respected to be sustained. This respect does not mark the end of vitality. It marks a transition to a form of vitality built on balance rather than abundance. After middle age, hormonal systems do not collapse. They lose synchrony. Hormones are often described as switches that turn functions on and off, but in reality they operate more like conductors, coordinating timing across the body. In early life, this coordination is tight. Signals rise and fall in predictable patterns. Growth, repair, sleep, appetite, and stress response move together. This harmony depends on both production and timing. As long as signals arrive in the right sequence and proportion, the body feels balanced. After middle age, that timing begins to drift. Hormone levels may remain within normal ranges, yet their rhythms lose alignment. Signals arrive slightly too early, too late, or in altered proportion. The body still receives instructions, but the orchestra no longer plays in perfect unison. This loss of synchrony has wide effects. Systems that once responded together now respond separately. Energy availability no longer matches demand precisely. Sleep does not fully reset the system. Stress lingers longer than its cause. Appetite fluctuates without clear reason. These experiences are often interpreted as dysfunction, but they reflect coordination loss rather than failure. Evolution favored hormonal systems that could respond flexibly to environment, not systems designed for lifelong precision. In ancestral conditions, hormonal coordination mattered most during development and reproductive years. After that, survival depended more on adaptability than on exact timing. As a result, hormonal systems were not refined to maintain perfect synchrony indefinitely. Middle age is where this limitation becomes perceptible. The body still produces hormones. It still responds to them. What changes is coherence. Signals overlap when they once followed sequence. Recovery signals compete with stress signals. Maintenance signals arrive during activity. The body manages, but efficiency drops. This inefficiency explains many subtle changes associated with aging that do not fit clean diagnostic categories. People feel out of rhythm rather than unwell. The day feels misaligned. Energy peaks and dips unpredictably. These sensations arise because hormonal cues no longer reinforce each other as strongly. The body must interpret mixed messages. Over time, this interpretation costs energy. Systems compensate by reducing responsiveness. Sensitivity declines to avoid overreaction. This protective adjustment further blunts feedback, creating a loop of muted signaling. Middle age is when this loop becomes noticeable. The body does not lose hormonal control. It shifts toward tolerance. Instead of precise regulation, it accepts broader ranges. Stability is preserved, but at the expense of sharpness. This shift affects how the body feels from within. Emotional responses flatten slightly. Physical responses slow. Recovery becomes less decisive. None of these changes indicate collapse. They reflect a system prioritizing continuity over coordination. Understanding this reframes hormonal aging. It is not about levels falling off a cliff. It is about timing, drifting out of phase. The body continues to function, but it does so with less internal agreement. Middle age marks the stage where this disagreement becomes part of daily experience. The body remains responsive, but it is no longer tightly synchronized. That loss of synchrony sets the stage for many later changes, not as causes on their own, but as amplifiers of other forms of strain. Hormonal aging does not break the body. It makes the body less unified. As hormonal synchrony fades after middle age, the body begins to rely less on clear cycles and more on continuous adjustment. In early life, hormones rise and fall in strong, well-defined patterns. Sleep prepares the body for wakefulness. Activity builds pressure for rest. Stress activates response, and then resolves. These cycles create contrast. The body moves between states with clarity. After middle age, the contrast softens. Hormonal signals overlap rather than alternate. Signals meant for recovery persist into activity. Signals meant for alertness bleed into rest. The body no longer switches cleanly between modes. It blends them. This blending explains why rest often feels incomplete and activity feels less focused. The body is always partially in transition. This state is not pathological. It reflects a system adapting to reduced precision. Evolution did not require strict separation between states late in life. Flexibility mattered more than rhythm. A body that could remain moderately alert while resting, or moderately rested while active, was less vulnerable in unpredictable environments. Over time, this flexibility becomes default. Middle age is when the default shifts from rhythmic to continuous. The body maintains balance by adjusting constantly rather than resetting periodically. This constant adjustment is effective, but it is energetically expensive. It requires ongoing interpretation of mixed signals. Systems must negotiate priorities rather than follow a clear sequence. The result is a sense of being never fully on and never fully off. Energy feels muted rather than absent. Sleep restores function, but not clarity. Wakefulness provides capability, but not sharpness. These experiences are often attributed to external stress or lifestyle, yet they arise even in calm conditions. They reflect internal signaling that has lost strong contrast. The body adapts by lowering expectations. It becomes less reactive to peaks in order to avoid instability. It is decline through smoothing. The body smooths its signals to remain workable over a longer span. Middle age is where that smoothing becomes felt. The body does not stop responding. It responds more evenly, more cautiously, and with less dramatic variation. This change is subtle, but it shapes everything that follows. As hormonal signaling becomes smoother and less contrasted, another consequence quietly emerges. Feedback loses urgency. In early life, hormonal messages demand action. Hunger insists on eating. Fatigue insists on rest. Stress demands response. These signals are sharp because the body depends on rapid correction to maintain growth and reproduction. After middle age, the same signals arrive with less force. They are suggestions rather than commands. The body no longer escalates every imbalance into an urgent call. Instead, it tolerates deviation within wider limits. This tolerance protects stability, but it also reduces responsiveness. The body becomes slower to correct small imbalances, allowing them to persist longer. Over time, persistence replaces resolution. This is why certain sensations after middle age feel vague rather than intense. Discomfort is present, but not acute. Fatigue is noticeable, but not overwhelming. Motivation is lower, but not absent. These muted states reflect a system that has lowered the volume on its own alarms. Evolution favored this change because constant high alert carries energetic cost. A body that reacted strongly to every fluctuation would exhaust itself over a long lifespan. Dampening signals conserves energy and prevents instability. The trade-off is clarity. Without sharp feedback, the body relies more on habit and less on correction. Patterns become entrenched. Daily rhythms stabilize, even if they are not optimal. The body prefers predictability over precision. Middle age is when this preference becomes dominant. The body no longer strives to recalibrate fully. It aims to remain within acceptable bounds. This shift explains why habits formed later in life feel harder to change. The hormonal system does not push strongly for adjustment. It accepts the current state as workable. Change still occurs, but it requires sustained influence rather than brief effort. This dampened feedback also shapes emotional experience. Emotional peaks soften because hormonal amplification is reduced. Stress hormones rise less dramatically, but they also resolve more slowly. Joy feels steadier, but less intense. The emotional landscape becomes flatter, not empty. This flattening supports endurance. It reduces volatility, yet it also alters how life feels moment to moment. Middle age marks the stage where the body trades sharp correction for long-term stability. Hormonal systems still guide behavior, but they do so by narrowing extremes rather than by enforcing balance through strong signals. The body becomes harder to disrupt, but also harder to energize fully. This duality is often misinterpreted as decline alone. In reality, it reflects a strategic shift. The body is adapting to prolonged use. It assumes that conditions will persist and adjusts accordingly. Rapid resets are replaced by gradual accommodation. Understanding this helps explain why late-life change feels slow and resistant. The body is no longer optimized for rapid transformation. It is optimized for persistence. Middle age is where this optimization becomes evident. Hormonal signals continue to shape function, but they operate under a different philosophy. Stability is maintained by reducing urgency, widening tolerance, and relying on continuity. The body does not break because hormones disappear. It changes because hormonal guidance becomes quieter. What follows is not collapse, but a long, steady negotiation between function and endurance. After middle age, changes in muscles, bones, and connective tissue rarely occur in isolation. They unfold together, as parts of a single system designed to move the body efficiently under load. In early life, this system is robust. Muscles generate force easily. Bones absorb impact without protest. Tendons and ligaments transmit movement smoothly. These components reinforce one another. When one element weakens slightly, the others compensate. Strength masks stiffness. Flexibility hides minor loss of power. Over time, however, the balance between these tissues shifts. Muscle mass gradually declines. Bone density slowly reduces. Connective tissue loses elasticity. Each change is modest on its own, but together they alter how force travels through the body. Movement becomes less forgiving. Loads that were once distributed evenly now concentrate in specific areas. This concentration increases strain, even during ordinary activity. Middle age is when this redistribution of force becomes noticeable. The body still moves, but it does so with greater internal tension. Muscles work harder to stabilize joints. Tendons absorb more stress to protect bone. Bones experience pressure patterns they were not optimized to handle repeatedly. This interconnected strain explains why stiffness, weakness, and joint discomfort often appear together rather than separately. The system ages as a unit because it functions as one. Evolution shaped this system to support survival tasks such as walking long distances, carrying loads, and reacting quickly. It was not refined to maintain peak mechanical efficiency across many decades. Once growth and reproduction were complete, maintaining maximal strength and resilience offered little evolutionary advantage. As a result, maintenance of this system becomes less precise after middle age. Repair continues, but it favors continuity over optimization. Muscles regenerate fibers, but with altered composition. Bones remodel, but at a slower rate. Connective tissue repairs, but with reduced elasticity. These changes interact. Reduced muscle support increases load on joints. Reduced joint stability alters movement patterns. Altered movement accelerates wear elsewhere. The body adapts, but each adaptation adds to overall strain. Middle age is where these adaptations begin to accumulate visibly. Tasks that once required little thought now demand awareness. Balance feels less automatic. Movements become more deliberate. These sensations are not signs of sudden breakdown. They reflect a system compensating for gradual loss of shared support. The body is still capable, but it must coordinate effort more carefully. Understanding this coordination helps explain why exercise, rest, and posture have different effects after middle age. Interventions that target one component rarely resolve the whole experience because the system responds as a network. Muscles, bones, and connective tissue age together because they depend on one another. The body does not lose strength simply because muscles weaken. It loses ease because the entire support structure is adjusting simultaneously. Middle age marks the point where this adjustment becomes felt. The body reveals that movement has always depended on balance between tissues. When that balance shifts, effort increases. The system remains functional, but it requires more cooperation from awareness. Movement becomes something to manage rather than something to assume. This is the first stage of mechanical aging, not collapse, but coordination under new constraints. As the musculoskeletal system ages after middle age, another subtle shift takes place. Movement becomes less about power and more about protection. In early life, muscles generate force freely and joints tolerate wide ranges of motion without consequence. The body trusts its structure. After middle age, that trust becomes conditional. Muscles begin to co-contract more often, tightening around joints to increase stability. This strategy protects vulnerable tissues, but it also increases effort. Movements feel heavier not because strength is absent, but because more energy is spent on control. Bones, sensing altered loading patterns, remodel conservatively. They maintain structural integrity, but with reduced responsiveness to stress. Connective tissue, less elastic than before, transmits force less smoothly. Together, these changes transform how movement is organized. The body favors caution over efficiency. This reorganization explains why movements after middle age often feel stiff before they feel weak. Stiffness is a stabilizing response. It limits range to reduce risk. While this response preserves function, it also reduces fluidity. Each movement requires more coordination and more energy. Over time, this added cost accumulates as fatigue. The body still performs tasks, but it does so with greater internal resistance. Evolution favored this protective shift because injury carried high cost in later life. A broken bone or torn tendon could be fatal in ancestral environments. Preserving basic mobility mattered more than preserving maximal performance. As a result, the body gradually prioritizes joint integrity over force output. Middle age is where this priority becomes evident. People notice that warming up takes longer, sudden movements feel risky, recovery from minor strains requires patience. These experiences reflect a system operating under a different rule set. Muscles no longer exist to express strength alone. They exist to guard structure. This guarding behavior alters posture and movement patterns. Subtle changes in gait reduce impact but increase strain elsewhere. Shoulders round to protect the spine, shifting load to the neck. Hips stiffen to stabilize balance, increasing stress on knees. Each adjustment solves a local problem while creating new demands. The body manages these demands through further adaptation. Over time, layers of protection accumulate. Movement remains possible, but it becomes less spontaneous. The system trades ease for safety. This trade is not a mistake. It is an adaptive response to a body that can no longer afford injury. Middle age is when this response becomes noticeable because reserves that once allowed recovery from missteps are thinner. The body learns to avoid missteps altogether. Understanding this helps explain why physical capability after middle age feels situational rather than absolute. On some days, movement flows easily. On others, the same movements feel constrained. The difference lies in how much protection the body feels it needs at that moment. Fatigue, stress, and prior strain all influence this assessment. The body continuously evaluates risk. This evaluation shapes movement without conscious awareness. What feels like inconsistency is actually responsiveness. The musculoskeletal system is adapting moment by moment to preserve continuity. Middle age marks the stage where preservation becomes the dominant goal. Strength still exists, but it is expressed cautiously. Flexibility remains, but it is offered selectively. The body continues to move, but it does so with memory. Every movement carries the influence of past strain. This memory is not stored in thought, but in tissue behavior. The body remembers where it has been vulnerable, and it adjusts accordingly. Aging of the musculoskeletal system is not just loss of tissue, it is the accumulation of protective strategies. These strategies keep the body upright and mobile for longer, but they change how movement feels. Middle age is where movement becomes negotiated rather than assumed. As protective movement patterns settle in after middle age, the body begins to experience a quiet narrowing of mechanical options. In early life, there are many ways to perform the same action. Muscles can share load flexibly. Joints can move through wide ranges without consequence. Small inefficiencies are corrected automatically. After middle age, this flexibility decreases. The body relies more consistently on familiar pathways that feel safe. These pathways are reinforced through repetition. Movements that avoid discomfort are repeated. Movements that feel unstable are gradually abandoned. Over time, the range of motion that feels accessible shrinks, even if structural limits have not been reached. This narrowing is not caused by a single loss of strength or flexibility. It is shaped by accumulated caution. The body learns which movements carry higher energetic or structural cost and reduces their use. As unused ranges fade, tissues adapt to a smaller operating window. Muscles shorten slightly. Connective tissue stiffens in patterns that reflect habitual use. Bones remodel according to repeated loading. The system becomes efficient within a narrower scope, but less adaptable outside it. Middle age is when this specialization becomes noticeable. Tasks that fall outside routine feel disproportionately demanding. The body resists unfamiliar patterns because they require coordination across tissues that no longer share load evenly. This resistance is often interpreted as decline. In reality, it reflects optimization for continuity rather than versatility. Evolution favored bodies that could preserve essential function late in life, not bodies that could explore new mechanical possibilities indefinitely. As a result, the musculoskeletal system gradually prioritizes reliability over range. This priority reduces risk but increases rigidity. Movement becomes consistent but less forgiving. Small deviations produce larger sensations because fewer alternative pathways remain available. The body responds by reinforcing protection further. This feedback loop deepens specialization. Over time, the body feels more defined by what it does regularly and less capable of adapting spontaneously. Middle age is where this identity solidifies. The body becomes the sum of its repeated movements. This does not mean capability disappears. It means capability becomes context-dependent. Strength appears when movement follows familiar patterns. Weakness appears when it does not. Balance feels secure in known conditions and uncertain in new ones. These experiences reflect a system that has traded adaptability for endurance. The body continues to function well within its established boundaries. Outside those boundaries, effort rises sharply. Understanding this helps explain why maintaining movement variety feels increasingly important yet increasingly difficult. Variety challenges the protective strategies the body has built. It demands coordination across tissues that have adapted to narrower roles. The body responds cautiously, not because it is incapable, but because it has learned to avoid unnecessary risk. Middle age is where this learning becomes visible. The body is no longer an open field of potential movement. It is a cultivated landscape shaped by habit, protection, and accumulated history. Aging of the musculoskeletal system is not only about tissue loss, it is about the gradual refinement of movement into safer, narrower patterns. These patterns sustain life, but they alter experience. Movement becomes less exploratory and more intentional. The body does not collapse. It concentrates. This concentration supports longevity, but it also requires awareness to manage. Middle age marks the stage where movement must be maintained deliberately rather than assumed. The body continues to carry itself forward, but it does so along paths it knows well. What feels like restriction is often the body choosing familiarity over freedom. This choice is not imposed suddenly. It emerges slowly, guided by the logic of survival extended over time. After middle age, changes in the nervous system are rarely loud or dramatic. They unfold quietly, often mistaken for personality shifts or simple fatigue. The nervous system does not suddenly lose neurons or stop functioning. Instead, it begins to operate with different priorities. In early life, speed and flexibility dominate. Signals travel rapidly. New patterns are formed easily. The brain and peripheral nerves adapt quickly to changing demands. This adaptability supports learning, reaction, and exploration. Over time, however, the nervous system shifts towards stability. Speed becomes less important than reliability. Signals are routed through well-established pathways rather than newly formed ones. This shift conserves energy and reduces error, but it also slows response. Middle age is where this trade becomes perceptible. Reactions feel slightly delayed. Multitasking becomes more demanding. Mental and physical coordination requires more attention. These changes do not reflect loss of intelligence or awareness. They reflect a system that is optimizing for endurance rather than rapid adjustment. Evolution favored nervous systems that could support survival across varied conditions, not systems that maintained peak adaptability indefinitely. Once learning essential skills and navigating reproductive years were complete, preserving stable function mattered more than continued expansion. As a result, neural plasticity gradually declines. The brain still adapts, but it does so more selectively. New connections form, but they compete with established ones. The nervous system prefers familiar routes because they are efficient and reliable. Middle age is when this preference becomes noticeable. Tasks that once felt automatic now require conscious focus. This does not mean ability has vanished. It means the nervous system is relying more on intention than on reflex. Energy cost plays a role here as well. Rapid signaling and constant adaptation are energetically expensive. As energy margins narrow, the nervous system reduces unnecessary flexibility. It maintains core functions and stabilizes patterns that support daily life. This stabilization explains why habits feel stronger and harder to change after middle age. The nervous system has learned which patterns are safe and conserves them. Novelty requires more effort because it demands reorganization. The body responds to this demand with caution. From within, this feels like mental slowing or reduced sharpness. In reality, it is a shift in allocation. The nervous system is still capable, but it is no longer spending energy on speed unless needed. Middle age marks the stage where neural efficiency replaces neural exuberance. Signals are processed more deliberately, responses are filtered, noise is reduced. This filtering supports stability, but it also reduces spontaneity. Understanding this reframes cognitive and sensory changes associated with aging. The nervous system is not failing to keep up. It is choosing to conserve. It is prioritizing clarity over speed, reliability over novelty. These priorities shape how the body and mind experience the world. Attention narrows, focus deepens, reaction slows slightly. None of this implies loss of self. It reflects a nervous system adapting to a longer lifespan than it was originally optimized for. Middle age is where that adaptation becomes felt. The nervous system continues to guide the body, but it does so with a quieter hand. As the nervous system shifts towards stability after middle age, communication within the system becomes more deliberate and less redundant. In early life, signals often travel along multiple routes at once. The brain explores alternatives rapidly, reinforcing pathways that succeed and abandoning those that do not. This redundancy supports learning and quick adaptation. Over time, however, maintaining many parallel pathways becomes inefficient. The nervous system begins to favor the routes that have proven reliable. Less used connections weaken. Signal traffic concentrates along established circuits. This concentration reduces error and conserves energy, but it also limits flexibility. Middle age is when this narrowing becomes noticeable. Thinking feels more linear. Problem-solving favors known strategies. Sensory input is filtered more aggressively. The nervous system is not processing less information. It is selecting more carefully what it allows through. This selection shapes perception. Background noise fades, but so does sensitivity to subtle novelty. The world feels calmer, but also less vivid. These changes reflect an internal economy of attention. Attention is a costly resource. In early life, the nervous system invests heavily in scanning, sampling, and exploring. Later, it invests in maintaining coherence. Signals that do not clearly support function are suppressed. This suppression protects stability, but it also reduces responsiveness. The body becomes slower to register small changes because it is no longer designed to monitor everything equally. Evolution favored this economy because constant vigilance is exhausting. A nervous system that filters aggressively can sustain itself longer under continuous demand. Middle age is where this filtering becomes dominant. The brain prefers depth over breadth. Focus replaces alertness. Sustained attention becomes easier than rapid switching. At the same time, switching tasks feels more draining. This shift explains why multitasking becomes less comfortable after middle age. It is not because capacity has disappeared. It is because the nervous system has restructured how capacity is deployed. Instead of spreading effort thinly, it concentrates it. This concentration supports endurance, but it reduces agility. The nervous system also becomes more dependent on prediction. Familiar patterns require less processing. Novel patterns demand reconfiguration. As prediction increases, surprise decreases. The body responds more smoothly to expected conditions and more cautiously to unexpected ones. This cautious response can feel like hesitation. In reality, it is a protective delay. The nervous system is checking alignment before committing energy. Middle age is where this checking becomes conscious. People notice pauses where there were none before. Decisions feel slower, but often more considered. Sensory changes follow the same logic. Hearing, vision, and touch remain functional, but the brain emphasizes clarity over detail. Strong signals are prioritized. Weak signals are filtered out. This prioritization reduces overload, but it can also make subtle sensations harder to detect. The nervous system is not losing ability. It is narrowing its field to preserve coherence. Understanding this reframes the experience of mental and sensory change. What feels like dulling is often refinement. The system is shaping itself for long-term use. It reduces noise to sustain function. Middle age marks the stage where this refinement becomes felt. The nervous system continues to guide behavior, but it does so with fewer distractions and fewer options. Stability replaces abundance. The mind becomes quieter, not empty. The body becomes steadier, not rigid. This quietness supports endurance, but it changes how the world is experienced from within. As the nervous system settles into narrower pathways after middle age, another quiet change becomes apparent. Effort shifts from automatic to intentional. In early life, many actions unfold with minimal awareness. The nervous system handles coordination, balance, and response without conscious involvement. After middle age, this automation softens. The body still performs familiar tasks, but it increasingly relies on attention to guide them. Walking requires awareness of footing. Lifting demands consideration of posture. Concentration must be protected from distraction. These demands are subtle, but they accumulate. The nervous system is not losing control. It is redistributing responsibility. Tasks that were once handled reflexively are now shared with conscious awareness. This redistribution conserves neural resources by reducing constant background processing. Instead of maintaining high readiness everywhere, the nervous system activates focus where it is needed. Middle age is when this strategy becomes noticeable. Life feels more effortful not because ability is gone, but because participation is required. Awareness becomes part of movement and thought. This involvement has consequences. Attention is finite. When it is engaged in basic coordination, less remains for spontaneity. Actions feel heavier because they draw from cognitive as well as physical resources. This blending of effort explains why mental fatigue and physical fatigue often appear together after middle age. The nervous system no longer separates them as cleanly. Evolution favored this integration because it reduced risk. A body that pays attention moves more cautiously. Caution preserves integrity when recovery is slower and reserves are thinner. The cost is ease. Automatic flow gives way to guided action. Over time, this guidance becomes habitual. People learn to move and think with awareness as default. This does not reduce competence, it reshapes it. Skill becomes deliberate rather than effortless. Precision replaces speed. Consistency replaces spontaneity. The nervous system supports this shift by stabilizing attention patterns. Focus narrows to what is essential. Distraction feels more disruptive because it competes directly with coordination. Middle age is where this competition becomes felt. The mind prefers fewer tasks, fewer transitions, fewer interruptions. This preference is not limitation. It is alignment with a system that values continuity. Emotional experience changes in parallel. Emotional responses feel steadier because they are less amplified by reflexive signaling. The nervous system dampens sudden shifts to preserve equilibrium. This damping supports endurance, but it also reduces immediacy. Feelings unfold more slowly. Reactions are delayed, but often more measured. The body is not withdrawing from experience, it is pacing it. Understanding this helps explain why life after middle age often feels quieter. The nervous system has reduced background noise to sustain long-term function. It requires cooperation from awareness to operate smoothly. Attention becomes a resource to manage carefully. Middle age marks the stage where the nervous system invites consciousness into roles it once handled alone. This invitation changes how the body and mind feel from within. Effort becomes intentional. Presence becomes necessary. What feels like slowing down is often the nervous system asking for partnership. It no longer rushes ahead. It moves deliberately, carrying the body forward with steadiness rather than speed. After middle age, the body begins to carry a form of internal activity that rarely announces itself clearly. It is not infection, not injury, and not illness in the traditional sense. It is a low, persistent level of immune engagement that operates in the background. In early life, the immune system responds sharply and then resolves. Threats appear, defenses activate, and once the threat is cleared, the system returns to baseline. This clarity depends on precision. Immune cells must distinguish between danger and normal tissue accurately. Over time, that precision softens. The immune system remains effective at preventing catastrophic failure, but it becomes less selective. Small signals that once would have been ignored now trigger mild response. The body exists in a state of quiet readiness. This readiness is not harmful in itself. It reflects a system that has learned to expect irregularity. After decades of accumulated repair, altered tissue and cellular debris, the immune system adapts by broadening its sensitivity. It tolerates less ambiguity. As a result, it stays partially active. Middle age is where this partial activation becomes meaningful. Energy that was once available for movement, recovery, and clarity is now shared with ongoing immune monitoring. The person may feel vaguely tired, achy, or slowed without obvious cause. These sensations are often attributed to age itself, but they arise from a specific shift in immune behavior. The body is spending energy maintaining internal order in a more complex environment. Evolution favored immune systems that could respond aggressively early in life, when infections posed immediate risk. Precision mattered because unnecessary activation wasted energy needed elsewhere. Later in life, the cost-benefit balance changes. Preventing catastrophic infection remains important, but the body now contains more internal irregularities that require supervision. Mild, continuous immune activity becomes acceptable. It preserves stability at the cost of background strain. This strain is subtle. It does not produce fever or acute illness. It produces persistence, stiffness that does not fully resolve, fatigue that returns without clear trigger, sensitivity that fluctuates unpredictably. These experiences reflect a body that is managing internal complexity rather than responding to external threat. Middle age is when this management becomes noticeable because energy margins are thinner. What was once absorbed quietly now shapes sensation. Importantly, this background immune activity is not the result of modern stress alone. It would emerge even in calm environments. It arises from accumulated biological history. Every repair leaves residue. Every adaptation alters tissue. The immune system must interpret these changes continuously. Over time, interpretation becomes engagement. The body remains healthy, but it is never completely at rest. This state does not imply disease. It implies vigilance. Understanding this reframes the idea of inflammation in aging. It is not an enemy to be eliminated. It is a condition to be managed. The immune system is doing what it evolved to do: maintain order under uncertainty. Middle age marks the stage where uncertainty increases internally rather than externally. The body turns its attention inward. Energy is diverted to monitoring rather than expansion. This diversion does not stop life. It slows it gently. The body continues forward, carrying a quiet conversation between repair and defense that never fully ends. As low-level immune activity becomes more persistent after middle age, its effects begin to shape how the body feels even during periods of rest. In early life, rest usually means quiet. The immune system stands down, repair completes, and energy is restored. After middle age, rest no longer brings complete stillness. The immune system continues to scan, interpret, and respond at a mild level. This ongoing activity creates a subtle internal load. The person may sleep, but wake without full refreshment. Muscles relax, yet a sense of stiffness remains. The body feels calm, but not empty of effort. These sensations arise because immune engagement does not pause simply because external demands stop. It is tied to internal complexity rather than immediate threat. Over decades, the body accumulates altered cells, modified proteins, and remnants of past repair. None are dangerous alone. Together, they require oversight. The immune system adapts by maintaining a low hum of activity. This hum consumes energy steadily rather than in bursts. Middle age is when the steady cost becomes noticeable. Energy that once returned quickly after rest now recovers slowly because it is continuously shared with immune regulation. This sharing explains why rest feels less restorative, even when sleep duration is adequate. The body is not failing to rest. It is resting while working. Evolution did not design immune systems to disengage fully in complex internal environments. In ancestral conditions, such complexity rarely accumulated. Lives were shorter, tissues were replaced less often. Modern longevity creates a new situation. The immune system must coexist with decades of biological history. It learns to operate quietly rather than episodically. This operation supports stability, but it also blurs the boundary between rest and activity. The body becomes accustomed to a baseline of internal work. Over time, this baseline reshapes sensation. Mild discomfort feels normal. Low-level fatigue becomes familiar. The absence of sharp symptoms masks the presence of continuous demand. Middle age is when this familiarity emerges. People often describe feeling not quite sick, but not quite well. This description reflects immune background activity rather than disease. The body is functioning, but it is allocating resources toward maintenance that cannot be deferred. Importantly, this state does not indicate failure of the immune system. It indicates adaptation. The immune system is matching its behavior to a body that is no longer uniform. It must monitor variation rather than respond to clear threats alone. This monitoring reduces the likelihood of acute crises, but it increases chronic load. Understanding this helps explain why anti-inflammatory approaches often produce mixed results. Suppressing immune activity may reduce symptoms temporarily, but it can also remove necessary oversight. The issue is not excessive defense, but continuous complexity. The immune system is responding to what the body has become. Middle age marks the point where internal complexity outweighs external danger. The immune system turns inward, maintaining order through sustained attention. This attention consumes energy slowly and steadily. The body adapts by lowering expectations of complete recovery. Full restoration becomes rare. Functional stability becomes the goal. Rest supports this stability, but it does not erase background work. The body continues forward under this new condition. It is not inflamed in crisis. It is vigilant in continuity. This vigilance shapes how aging feels from within. The body is not at war with itself. It is maintaining peace across a more complex internal landscape. As background immune activity persists after middle age, the body begins to recalibrate what it considers normal. Sensations that once signaled imbalance become integrated into baseline experience. Mild stiffness on waking, a low sense of heaviness through the day, fatigue that rises without clear cause and settles without clear resolution. These are not symptoms pointing to a single problem. They are expressions of a system that has accepted continuous internal monitoring as part of everyday function. The immune system no longer waits for a clear enemy. It maintains order within a body that has accumulated variation. This acceptance shapes perception. Discomfort loses urgency. The body learns to live with it rather than eliminate it. In early life, strong immune signals demand action because unresolved threat is dangerous. After middle age, persistent low-level signaling becomes tolerable because it does not threaten immediate survival. The body adapts by widening its comfort zone. This widening protects stability, but it also reduces contrast. Feeling completely well becomes less distinct from feeling slightly unwell. The body operates within a narrower emotional and physical range. Middle age is where this narrowing becomes noticeable. People may feel less reactive to minor discomfort, yet also less capable of feeling fully restored. This trade-off reflects immune prioritization. The system values ongoing equilibrium over episodic resolution. It keeps inflammation low enough to avoid damage, but high enough to manage internal irregularities. This balance is delicate. When it holds, life continues with subtle strain. When it shifts, symptoms become clearer. Understanding this balance helps explain why aging rarely feels dramatic. Decline unfolds quietly through adjustment, rather than crisis. The immune system is central to this process because it mediates how the body interprets itself. It decides what is noise and what is signal. After middle age, more internal variation is classified as acceptable noise. The body stops demanding correction for every deviation. This tolerance allows function to continue without constant alarm, but it also permits accumulation. The immune system does not erase complexity, it manages it. Over time, management becomes the dominant task. Energy is spent maintaining order rather than restoring simplicity. Middle age is when the cost of that task becomes felt. The body feels older not because it is inflamed in crisis, but because it is engaged in continuous negotiation. This negotiation shapes mood, energy, and sensation. Calmness increases, but sharpness decreases. Resilience remains, but it is quieter. The immune system supports this quiet resilience by smoothing extremes. It prevents small irregularities from becoming emergencies. In doing so, it creates a background state that feels steady but heavy. This heaviness is often misinterpreted as decline alone. It is also endurance. The body is carrying its history forward while maintaining internal peace. Middle age is when that effort becomes perceptible. The immune system does not announce its work loudly. It whispers through persistence. The body continues, not by eliminating complexity, but by living with it. Aging is shaped not by constant battle, but by continuous maintenance. The immune system becomes a caretaker, rather than a defender. This shift marks a profound change in how the body relates to itself. What once required reaction now requires patience. What once resolved quickly now settles slowly. The body remains alive and functional, but it does so under a different agreement with time. By the time the body reaches middle age, many of its limits have already been set. What changes next is not the design itself, but the environment in which that design is revealed. Modern life did not create the breakdown of the human body after middle age. It exposed it. For most of human history, few people lived long enough for gradual decline to become a dominant experience. Life ended earlier, often abruptly, through infection, injury, or scarcity. The body's long-term weaknesses remained hidden because they were rarely tested. Today, those weaknesses are tested every day simply by continuing to live. Extended lifespan brings the body into territory it was never required to navigate before. The same biological design now operates under new conditions. Safety is higher, food is stable, acute threats are reduced. As a result, the body survives long enough for slow processes to accumulate and interact. Middle age marks the point where this interaction becomes visible. The body begins to feel less resilient, not because modern life has damaged it, but because modern life has removed earlier endpoints. Evolution shaped the body to function adequately under short, unpredictable lives. It did not anticipate decades of relative stability. When that stability arrives, the body's unfinished business surfaces. Small inefficiencies that once had no consequence now matter because they persist. Repair systems that were never refined for long-term precision reveal their limits. Energy systems that assumed fluctuating demands now face continuous use. The result is not collapse, but exposure. Modern life shines light on processes that were always present. This exposure often leads to misplaced blame. People attribute aging-related decline to technology, sedentary habits, or psychological stress alone. While these factors influence expression, they do not create the underlying trajectory. Even in ideal conditions, the body would still change after middle age. The difference is visibility. Modern life removes the distractions of survival, allowing the body's internal negotiations to be felt more clearly. Discomfort that might once have been ignored now becomes central. Because fewer external threats compete for attention, the body becomes the primary environment we inhabit. Middle age is when this shift occurs. The body's signals grow louder not because they are new. None of these are modern inventions. They are ancient processes meeting unprecedented longevity. Understanding this reframes the relationship between aging and lifestyle. Modern life does not break the body after middle age. It reveals what evolution left unresolved. The body is living beyond its original context. This does not make it defective. It makes it exposed. The challenge of middle age is not to return to a past design, but to understand the conditions under which that design must now operate. The body continues forward, carrying ancient assumptions into a modern world. What feels like breakdown is often the collision between long life and short-term biology. Middle age is where that collision becomes conscious. As modern life removes many immediate threats, the body is asked to perform a task it was never optimized for: consistency without interruption. In ancestral conditions, stress arrived in bursts. Hunger, danger, cold, and exertion were intense but temporary. Between these events, there were periods of relative rest. The body evolved to handle this rhythm. It could mobilize energy quickly, then recover when demand passed. Modern life alters this pattern. Stress becomes low-level and continuous. Effort is sustained rather than episodic. The body is rarely pushed to extremes, but it is rarely released either. Middle age is where the cost of this continuity becomes apparent. Systems designed for fluctuation now face constant engagement. Energy regulation adapts by lowering output to avoid exhaustion. Hormonal signals smooth to prevent instability. Immune vigilance remains partially active to manage ongoing internal complexity. These adaptations preserve function, but they change how the body feels. Fatigue becomes diffuse rather than sharp. Motivation softens rather than collapses. Recovery becomes partial rather than complete. None of these changes indicate that modern life is directly harming the body. They indicate that the body is adapting to a demand pattern it did not evolve to sustain indefinitely. Even without psychological stress, modern consistency imposes biological cost. Sitting, standing, thinking, and focusing for long stretches require continuous neural and muscular engagement. The body responds by reducing amplitude. Peaks are lowered to conserve energy. Valleys are filled to maintain baseline. Middle age is where this leveling becomes noticeable because energetic margins are thinner. What once felt stimulating now feels draining because it never fully ends. The body cannot rely on clear recovery windows. Instead, it must manage load continuously. This management shapes posture, movement, attention, and mood. Muscles remain slightly engaged to maintain position. The nervous system maintains focus to meet ongoing cognitive demand. Hormonal systems remain active to regulate stability. Each system contributes a small, steady cost. Together, they reshape experience. The body feels used rather than challenged. This sensation is often interpreted as decline. In reality, it reflects adaptation to uninterrupted use. Evolution did not design bodies for constant low-level demand across decades. It designed them for cycles of exertion and release. Modern life compresses these cycles into a narrow band. Middle age is when the body begins to resist that compression. It does so by slowing, smoothing, and conserving. These strategies reduce wear, but they also reduce vitality. Understanding this helps reframe the relationship between aging and routine. The issue is not that life has become easier. It is that it has become unbroken. The body thrives on variation. Without it, systems lose contrast. Recovery loses clarity. Effort loses reward. Middle age marks the stage where the absence of clear cycles becomes felt internally. The body responds not by failing, but by adjusting expectations. It lowers intensity to survive continuity. This adjustment is subtle and gradual. It does not announce itself as illness. It announces itself as heaviness. The body carries on, shaped by a world that no longer interrupts it enough to allow full renewal. Modern life does not accelerate aging by itself. It changes the rhythm in which aging unfolds. Middle age is where that rhythm becomes audible. As the rhythm of modern life settles into continuity, the body gradually loses one of its most important tools for renewal: contrast. In earlier human environments, contrast was unavoidable. Periods of intense effort were followed by clear release. Danger ended. Hunger was satisfied. Movement gave way to stillness. These transitions allowed the body to reset its internal states. Repair signals rose clearly. Rest felt complete. After middle age, modern life offers fewer of these contrasts. Work, responsibility, attention, and mild stress blend together across days and years. The body rarely experiences a clear signal that effort has ended. Without that signal, repair never fully takes priority. The body remains partially engaged at all times. This partial engagement becomes the default state. Middle age is where the cost of this default becomes noticeable. The body feels constantly on, but never fully activated. It also feels never fully off. This in-between state consumes energy quietly. It prevents deep restoration without triggering acute fatigue. The result is persistence rather than crisis. Evolution did not design the body to thrive in such ambiguity. Clear transitions were essential for survival. They allowed systems to switch modes efficiently. Without transitions, the body must manage competing demands simultaneously. Hormones overlap, neural focus remains engaged. Muscles maintain low-level tension. Immune monitoring continues. Each system contributes a small load. Together, they create a sustained background effort. Middle age is when this effort becomes felt, because the body's capacity to absorb it without sensation has diminished. What once passed unnoticed now registers as heaviness, dull fatigue, or reduced clarity. This does not mean the body is malfunctioning. It means it is adapting to a world with fewer endings. Modern life extends tasks but shortens pauses. Even rest is often fragmented by anticipation and attention. The body never fully disengages. Over time, this shapes physiology. Systems recalibrate to function under constant partial demand. Peaks flatten, valleys rise. The body becomes stable but less dynamic. This stability supports longevity, but it alters experience. Joy feels quieter. Energy feels steadier but lower. Recovery feels incomplete. Middle age is where this altered experience becomes central. The body reveals that renewal requires more than rest. It requires contrast. Without contrast, repair signals cannot dominate. The body cannot fully switch into restoration mode. Instead, it maintains a compromised state that preserves function while preventing collapse. Understanding this reframes the relationship between aging and environment. Modern life does not damage the body directly. It removes the clear boundaries that once structured biological rhythms. The body adapts by smoothing itself across time. This smoothing reduces extremes, but it also reduces renewal. Middle age is where the consequences of that smoothing are felt. The body continues forward, not as a system failing under pressure, but as one adapting to a world that no longer pauses. Aging unfolds not because life is too hard, but because it is too continuous. The body was built to recover between chapters. Modern life turns those chapters into a single long paragraph. Middle age is where the body begins to feel the absence of punctuation. After examining how the body changes, adapts, and reallocates its resources after middle age, a deeper question emerges. If these changes are so consistent, so widespread, and so predictable, then aging may not represent a malfunction at all. It may represent a trade-off. In evolutionary terms, a trade-off occurs when a system gains one advantage by relinquishing another. The human body is full of such compromises. Speed is traded for accuracy. Strength is traded for endurance. Flexibility is traded for stability. These exchanges are not failures. They are solutions shaped by survival pressure. Aging after middle age reflects one of the largest trade-offs in human biology. The body trades peak performance for persistence. Early life is optimized for growth, reproduction, and adaptability. Later life is optimized for continuity. The body does not attempt to remain youthful because youth is energetically expensive and evolutionarily unnecessary. Instead, it reshapes itself to endure longer under reduced margin. This reshaping explains why aging feels like loss from a personal perspective, yet coherence from a biological one. What feels like decline is often the cost of maintaining function over time. Muscle mass decreases, but injury risk is reduced through protective movement. Neural speed slows, but error rates decrease through filtering. Hormonal peaks flatten, but volatility is reduced. Each change removes intensity but preserves stability. Middle age is where these exchanges become visible because the body transitions from one optimization regime to another. The same systems that once prioritized expansion now prioritize conservation. This transition is not abrupt. It unfolds gradually, but its effects converge. The body feels different because it is operating under different rules. From an evolutionary standpoint, this shift is sensible. A body that survives longer with moderate capability contributes more to group knowledge, caregiving, and social stability than a body that burns out maintaining peak performance. Even before modern longevity, older individuals played roles that did not require physical dominance but benefited from persistence and experience. Evolution did not need bodies to remain fast or strong indefinitely. It needed them to remain functional. Middle age marks the stage where function is preserved through compromise rather than through abundance. Understanding this reframes aging as reorganization rather than decay. The body is not simply losing capacity, it is reallocating it. Some abilities fade because they are no longer prioritized. Others emerge because stability is favored. Patience increases as urgency decreases. Caution replaces impulsivity. Focus narrows, but depth grows. These changes are often overlooked because they do not resemble youthful strength, yet they reflect a body adapting to a longer horizon. Aging after middle age is not an accident layered on top of biology. It is biology expressing its underlying logic once early life priorities have been fulfilled. The body continues forward not by clinging to what it was, but by becoming something else. Middle age is where this becoming begins to feel irreversible. The trade-off has been made. The question is not how to avoid it, but how to understand it. As the body commits more fully to endurance after middle age, the trade-offs of this shift become clearer in daily experience. The body no longer seeks to maximize output, it seeks to minimize risk. This change affects how challenges are approached and how success is measured. In early life, success is often defined by capacity. How much can be done, how fast, how intensely. After middle age, success becomes defined by sustainability. How long something can be maintained without harm. The body recalibrates its internal standards accordingly. Effort is evaluated not by immediate reward, but by long-term cost. This recalibration explains why many activities feel different even when ability remains. The body discourages excess not through pain alone, but through reduced enthusiasm. Motivation softens before damage occurs. This softness is protective. It prevents overextension in a system that no longer recovers quickly from extremes. Evolution favored such preemptive restraint because it preserved function under prolonged use. A body that avoided unnecessary risks survived longer than one that pursued peak performance late in life. Middle age is when this restraint becomes noticeable because the contrast with earlier drive is still remembered. The body feels less willing, not less capable. This distinction matters. Capability remains, but it must be accessed carefully. The body asks for pacing rather than force. It rewards consistency rather than intensity. Over time, these preferences shape behavior. People become more selective. They choose activities that fit their energetic and structural limits. This selectivity is often mistaken for loss of ambition. In reality, it reflects a shift in biological priorities. The body is optimizing for continuity of function rather than for expansion. This optimization also alters emotional response. High arousal states become less frequent because they are energetically costly. Calm becomes easier to sustain than excitement. This does not eliminate joy. It changes its texture. Joy becomes quieter, more stable, less dependent on extremes. The nervous system supports this shift by dampening amplification. Hormonal systems smooth peaks. Immune systems maintain steady vigilance. Together, they create a body that is less reactive but more resilient. Middle age is where this resilience becomes the dominant trait. The body can withstand prolonged stress, but it resists rapid change. Adaptation occurs, but it unfolds slowly. This slowness is not failure. It is the price of durability. From an evolutionary perspective, a slower, steadier body contributes more over time than a volatile one. It conserves energy, avoids injury, and remains functional across many seasons. The cost is reduced flexibility. The body becomes less tolerant of disruption. Recovery from change takes longer. This encourages stability in environment and routine. Understanding this helps reframe frustration with aging. The body is not withdrawing from life. It is settling into a mode that favors survival over novelty. Middle age marks the point where this mode becomes conscious. The trade-off is no longer theoretical. It is felt in daily choices. Effort must be measured. Rest must be intentional. Change must be gradual. These requirements do not signal decline alone. They signal a body that has shifted its strategy. The question becomes how to live within that strategy rather than against it. Aging is not the loss of potential. It is the narrowing of priorities. The body chooses persistence, and in doing so, it asks the mind to choose differently as well. As the body settles fully into its endurance-oriented strategy after middle age, the final dimension of this trade-off becomes apparent. Identity shifts from performance to continuity. In early life, identity is often reinforced by what the body can do. Strength, speed, resilience, and recovery shape how a person understands themselves. These traits are visible, measurable, and rewarded. After middle age, the body gradually withdraws from this model. Performance becomes less reliable as a foundation for identity because it fluctuates under constraint. In its place, continuity emerges. The body values remaining present over remaining exceptional. This shift can feel disorienting because it is rarely named. People sense that something has changed, but they struggle to articulate what has been lost. What has been lost is not function alone. It is a framework for self-measurement. The body no longer supports constant comparison against youthful standards. It offers a different metric: persistence without collapse. This metric is quieter. It does not announce itself through peaks. It reveals itself through steadiness. Evolution favored this outcome because it allowed individuals to remain engaged in their environments without requiring constant physical dominance. Older bodies that endured contributed stability, memory, and regulation to social groups. They did not need to outperform. They needed to remain. Middle age is where this biological intention begins to surface psychologically. The body nudges the mind away from striving and toward maintenance. This nudge is often resisted because modern culture continues to reward performance across all ages. Yet the body is operating under older rules. It is aligning identity with survival rather than achievement. This alignment explains why pushing the body to meet past standards often leads to disproportionate cost. The body is no longer organized around that goal. It is organized around preserving function across time. When effort exceeds that organization, signals of resistance appear. Fatigue, hesitation, and reduced motivation are not failures of will. They are expressions of a different strategy. Accepting this does not require resignation. It requires reinterpretation. The body is not asking to be abandoned. It is asking to be partnered with, under new terms. Middle age marks the stage where partnership becomes essential. The body can no longer carry identity alone. It requires conscious alignment. Actions must reflect limits without surrendering meaning. Continuity becomes an active choice rather than a passive state. This choice shapes how aging is experienced. Those who attempt to reclaim performance as identity often experience aging as conflict. Those who recognize continuity as value experience it as adaptation. Evolution did not design the body to preserve youth. It designed it to preserve life. Middle age is where that design becomes explicit. The trade-off is complete. The body has chosen endurance over expression. What remains is not loss, but a different form of presence. One that values remaining intact over remaining exceptional. Understanding this reframes the narrative of breakdown. The body is not withdrawing from life. It is repositioning itself within it. The question that remains is not how to return to what was, but how to inhabit what is. After following the body through its gradual changes, adaptations, and trade-offs, the final question is no longer about why breakdown occurs, but how life continues within it. Middle age does not represent the end of usefulness or meaning. It represents a shift in how meaning is sustained. The body no longer promises unlimited capacity. It offers continuity instead. This continuity is quieter than youth, but it is not empty. It carries memory, regulation, and endurance. Evolution did not shape long life to be dramatic. It shaped it to be stable. The later stages of the human lifespan were never meant to mirror the early ones. They serve a different purpose. In ancestral groups, older individuals provided consistency rather than expansion. They held knowledge, moderated risk, and maintained social balance. Their bodies did not need to be fast. They needed to be present. Middle age marks the beginning of this role at the biological level. The body begins to prioritize remaining intact over remaining intense. This priority reshapes daily experience. Effort becomes measured. Attention deepens. Reaction slows, but judgment steadies. These changes are often interpreted as loss because modern culture values output and speed. Yet from a biological perspective, they represent a transition into a different form of contribution. The body continues to function, but it no longer seeks to exceed itself. It seeks to remain usable. This usability supports a longer arc of life. Aging after middle age is not a process to be defeated. It is a condition to be inhabited. The body asks for cooperation rather than control. It responds to listening rather than forcing. This does not mean surrendering ambition. It means redefining it. Ambition shifts from doing more to doing sustainably, from reaching further to lasting longer. Middle age is where this redefinition becomes unavoidable. The body enforces it through sensation. Fatigue limits excess. Discomfort discourages risk. Slowing creates space for awareness. These signals are not punishments. They are instructions. They guide behavior toward preservation rather than depletion. Understanding this reframes the idea of breakdown. What appears to be decline is often a boundary being drawn. The body is marking the conditions under which life can continue without collapse. Within those conditions, much remains possible. Meaning does not disappear when capacity narrows, it concentrates. Life becomes less about accumulation and more about continuity. The body supports this shift by stabilizing rather than accelerating. Middle age is the threshold where this support becomes active. The body is no longer preparing for the future through growth. It is maintaining the present through balance. This maintenance is not passive. It requires alignment between intention and limitation. When that alignment occurs, aging becomes less adversarial. The body and the mind move in the same direction. The question that remains is not how to stop aging, but how to live well within it. The body has chosen its path. The invitation is to walk alongside it, rather than against it. As life continues within the limits revealed after middle age, the body begins to teach a different relationship with time. In early life, time feels expansive. There is always another chance to recover, to improve, to push further. The body supports this feeling by absorbing mistakes and restoring balance quickly. After middle age, time feels denser. Actions carry weight because their effects last longer. Recovery is slower, not to punish, but to signal consequence. The body is no longer organized around unlimited retries. It is organized around preservation across remaining years. This shift changes how decisions are felt internally. Choices are no longer evaluated only by immediate outcome, but by how they shape continuity. The body becomes sensitive to cumulative cost. Small habits matter more than single efforts. Consistency matters more than intensity. These priorities are enforced biologically rather than intellectually. The body responds well to moderation and resists extremes. This resistance is often mistaken for fragility. In reality, it reflects selectivity. The body is choosing where to invest its remaining capacity. Evolution favored this selectivity because it reduced the risk of irreversible damage later in life. A single injury or collapse could end survival entirely. As a result, the body encourages caution not through fear, but through sensation. Excess effort feels unrewarding. Sustainable effort feels tolerable. This guidance reshapes daily rhythm. Days become more similar, but also more manageable. Peaks flatten, but crashes are avoided. Middle age is where this rhythm begins to feel natural rather than imposed. The body is no longer chasing potential. It is maintaining trajectory. This maintenance changes how fulfillment is experienced. Satisfaction comes less from breakthrough and more from steadiness. Progress becomes subtle. Growth becomes internal rather than visible. These shifts are difficult to articulate because modern narratives rarely value them. Yet biologically, they represent alignment. The body is functioning according to its design under extended lifespan. Understanding this helps reconcile the sense of loss that often accompanies aging. What feels like narrowing is also focus. What feels like slowing is also stabilization. The body is not withdrawing from life. It is pacing it. Middle age marks the stage where pacing replaces acceleration. This pacing allows life to continue without collapse. It preserves presence even as intensity fades. The body teaches this lesson quietly, through limits rather than instruction. Those limits are not walls. They are boundaries that define a sustainable path forward. Living within them does not diminish meaning. It changes its shape. Meaning becomes something that endures rather than something that peaks. The body supports this endurance by guiding attention toward what can be carried forward. Health becomes less about optimization and more about balance. Success becomes less about achievement and more about continuity. The body is not asking for resignation. It is asking for cooperation. Middle age is where that request becomes clear. The remaining years unfold under this new agreement. The question is not how much more can be taken, but how gently life can be held. At the end of this long arc, the body does not offer a solution. It offers a perspective. Aging after middle age is not a problem waiting to be fixed. It is a condition that asks to be understood. The body does not slow down to take something away. It slows down to make continuity possible. What appears as breakdown is often the body drawing a boundary around what can be sustained. Within that boundary, life continues with quieter strength. The body no longer chases expansion. It protects presence. It no longer promises ease. It offers stability. These are not small gifts. They are the foundations of a long life lived without collapse. Modern humans often ask how long the body can last. Evolution answers a different question: how long the body can remain usable. After middle age, usability becomes the measure. Not how much can be done, but how gently life can be carried forward. The body enforces this measure not through rules, but through sensation. Fatigue teaches restraint. Slowness teaches attention. Limits teach choice. These lessons arrive gradually, layered over years, until they form a new way of living. This way is not lesser. It is different. The body becomes less dramatic, but more honest. Signals are no longer hidden behind surplus. What is felt reflects what is sustainable. In this honesty, there is clarity. The body reveals that it was never meant to last forever unchanged. It was meant to change in order to last. Aging is the mechanism of that change. It is how life adapts to time rather than resisting it. Middle age is where this adaptation becomes undeniable. The body no longer allows itself to be ignored. It asks to be lived with, not pushed through. When this request is heard, conflict softens. The body and mind stop pulling in opposite directions. Effort becomes intentional. Rest becomes meaningful. Presence becomes possible. This is not a return to youth. It is a movement into alignment. The body does not promise that everything will remain easy. It promises that life can continue if it is respected. That promise has always been part of human biology. It was simply hidden when lives were shorter. Now that we live longer, the promise becomes visible. The body is not breaking because it is weak. It is changing because it has endured. If aging after middle age is not a failure of design, but the expression of it, then the final question is not how to escape this process, but how to meet it. How to live within a body that no longer expands, but still carries life forward. How to listen when the body speaks more quietly, yet more truthfully than before.